When we began, I said I wanted to learn. And my God, I have been in school. I mean, I've learned so much. I have learned so much about food. I have learned so much about climate change. I've learned so much about language, about technology. I've learned so much. So I really want to thank each one of you for giving me the opportunity to learn. So I just want to make a couple of remarks, and I want to really thank, from the depth of my heart, the team that put this thing together. You've been absolutely phenomenal. Wairimo, Protel Studios, Gig Dynamics, literally all of you, you've been absolutely phenomenal in terms of the delivery, in terms of, your focus of mind. We worked on this thing 24 hours, and you did what you were supposed to do. So I'm really, really grateful to all of you. The musicians, the poets, immensely grateful. Nairobi, actually it's the National Museums of Kenya. Nairobi, National Museums of Kenya, NMK, grateful for the venue, for the space. I also want to thank one of my board members, Athman Lali Omar, for making it possible for things to happen in Mombasa. So Athman, again, from the depth of my heart, I want to thank you for hosting people in Mombasa with your team. Really, really grateful, for the work. So this morning as I was coming to work, I turned on my radio and there was music. There was Mwomboko. The Mwomboko song is part of the Gikuyu music. And at every celebration since 1963, it's been presented as part of the cultural heritage of the Kenyan people. Now, what many people do not know is that actually Mwomboko, which is supported by the accordion, got into Gikuyu culture in the late 1930s and early 1940s and was borrowed substantially from Scottish words. But it's been adopted, really, as part of our heritage, not just a heritage of the Gikuyu people, but also heritage of the Kenyan people, with its origin from Scotland. And we are talking about late 1930s. Over lunch, I mentioned to one of you that the music that is called Moderego, again, part of our cultural heritage, is derived from the Mijikenda community. Again, got into the community, into central Kenya in the 1930s and was adopted, as part of the culture, and it continues to be part of the culture. So culture is actually very, very dynamic, and that's what we've been learning throughout. Now, again, I think 2 days ago, I was listening to one of the Gikuyu stations, and someone said certain communities had reached Angirimiti. Ngirimiti. Initially, I was like, what word is that? Then later, as the news continued, I learned that actually Ngirimiti is agreement. Again, adopted from the English language as a lexical item and used in Kenyan broadcasting stations. Ngirimiti. Never knew such a word existed in my language until a couple of days ago. So when we started this symposium, we asked a set of 4 questions. How can we recognize and address injustices in and through cultural heritage in Africa to benefit the continent's youth? What does the circulation of certain knowledge or the lack of it, and the practices in cultural heritage perpetuate injustices, and how are they linked to historical antecedents? How can communities become more engaged in cultural heritage experiences in Africa? And how can indigenous knowledge suppressed through the colonial encounter provide solutions to the challenges of climate change? The one word that I saw consistently being invoked to answer this question was that we must listen more. Listening, that we must listen to ourselves as well as to others. And when we listen, we'll be able to address these questions. Because we have a shared humanity. And once we invoke this shared humanity and we listen to each other more, without the biases that we have been socialized to carrying, we shall actually become better human beings. And that's what I had throughout. So I think the questions that we posed are really answered fundamentally by the verb listen. Listen. Now, so we listen more to communities in the former colonies. We listen also to the whispers. The whispers in Europe, the whispers in the United States, and in other countries, because there are whispers. There are voices out there about the denial of alternative narratives from history and the denial of exposure to other ways of knowing the world. That is already happening, in the global north. People are asking questions and they are looking for answers. And the more we listen, the more we will discover that actually some of the challenges we have could be addressed through building very genuine relationships based on trust, based on friendship, and based on a shared recognition of our collective humanity. And that there is the possibility that we can always become better. That possibility is always there. But we have to look for it. It does not just happen. We have to be very deliberate, very intentional. And I heard that over and over again. We must be very deliberate in the ways in which we engage technology. We have to be very intentional in terms of working with communities and asking the question. So we are drawing knowledge from communities. But what are we giving back to those communities? And I would like to pose a challenge to our colleagues. Athman Lali today, really, told us there's something happening at the Nyumba ya Mtwana at the coast. A piece of land is being grabbed. There are challenges of climate change and the rising seas on the coast. This is what we are hearing. This is what we are seeing. Can we be very deliberate and purposeful in addressing those issues that were raised this morning by Athman, by protecting deliberately, intentionally, and collectively with our communities, with the coastal communities, to secure those spaces that are critical to them. As we discussed this morning again, the question of restitution, there is the collaboration that is required between academia, researchers, communities, the institutions in the global north, as well as the institutions in Africa, and so on. Can we listen more to each other? Can we find ways in which we can deal with these issues? Because if communities in Africa are saying that some of our ancestors are located elsewhere, and they deserve decent burial, please bring back the ancestors so that they can be buried and be dignified within their communities and the assets that are located elsewhere. And there is something to be done about policy reform, legislative reform, both here as well as in the global north. And we can do these things. It is actually in our power to do so. I think that we have the intellectual muscle to be able to find solutions to these challenges. And as I wrap up, I think that these things become possible if we wear a social justice lens. Without wearing a social justice lens, we shall only get really very small glimpses of the real problem. But once we wear the social justice lens, we'll be able to see the problem in a much more holistic manner, that we have a responsibility to each other. We have a responsibility to each other on the continent of Africa, and we have a responsibility to each other globally, And we do that by re-evaluating the value system that seems to be driving the world. Because the value system seems to be very singular, driven rather uncomfortably by a very strong sense of individualism and really denying the essence, the human essence of our collective responsibility to each other. Now, over lunch, I had a moment to share with, again, one of us, an idea, because my training actually is in linguistics. So my work revolves around the philosophy of language. And in this journey of linguistics, it really occurred to me that you cannot have language without interactivity. That it is only through language that we are able to reach out to each other, and that as we reach out to each other, we constitute and make language this critical part of our being. So if language itself is a consequence of interaction, if language itself is a consequence, is a result of interaction, then our refusal to interact with each other, to reach out to each other, is really a negation of our humanity, because our humanity is substantially driven by language. That's what defines us. That we are able to use language creatively. We are able to construct sentences that were not constructed before through, our mental machine, the devices in our mind that allow us to string words and create meaning and so forth and so on. So when we deny this connection, the human connection that helped us create language in the first place, then we are negating humanity itself. In fact, you can even go further and say that the human species and in its diversity, the essence of the human species and the environment in which we live and our interconnections with each other and the environment is really a mirror of how we should be living in this world. The connections between ourselves and the environment and the foods we grow and so forth and so on, the way we create things as we move along, the way we empower ourselves, the way we get disempowered, the way we do all sorts of things, the way we enrich each other and learning from each other, learning that when you are stuck with the concept of agreement, you can actually harvest from the English language and create Ngirimiti and be all right with it. When you are struggling to name a place, you can actually name it as Car Barnett, which is the home of Mr. Barnett, who lived somewhere in the Rift Valley in the 1940s amongst the Kalenjin. And using his name, you create a whole city, a whole town, and it remains as Car Barnett. It's a Kalenjin word, but derived from Mr. Barnett, who lived somewhere who came to Africa, and so on. And this is who we are. that we create every moment through connection, through interaction. And in this way, we advance humanity. This is the way we do it. We do not advance humanity by being singular. We advance humanity by being plural. That's how we do it. Because even when you are singular, you are actually still multiple. You are still more, even when you are assuming that you are singular. So our essence really is being multiple. It's being plural. It's being more than we imagine ourselves to be. So that when we isolate ourselves and assume that our source of knowledge is the only legitimate source of knowledge, then we are actually poorer by that belief. But when we reach out to other forms of knowledge, other forms of narratives, other forms of expression and so forth, we become better, we become richer, and we enrich other people in the process. So I really want to thank you for teaching me all this. I can tell you, I did not have a single thought that I have actually shared with you today before the symposium. It's the symposium that generated these reflections, because I had not spoken like this before. And therefore, you have enriched me during this interaction. You have made me a better person. You have made me go deeper into myself to understand myself better and to understand my place in the world. So I really want to thank you. And I want to say this, that I believe that at Twaweza Communications, we have already identified certain specific areas of advocacy, of capacity development, of research. And I want to challenge each one of you to go back and say, and ask yourself, what has the symposium taught you? What are you carrying forward? And for those of you who've joined us virtually, I want to thank you, because you became part of the conversation. You became part of the sources of knowledge that is enriching all of us. And we hope that you also were enriched, despite the fact that you are not here with us physically. And that's why we must always celebrate technology, because it's enabling us to do amazing things. It's enabling us to connect globally, to discover our weaknesses, to discover our strengths, to discover that actually we can use science to reach, communities and so on. So I want to thank you, and I want to wish you all the best, and to ask that you be blessed. And for those that are traveling out of Kenya, safe travels. May God bless you. May you realize your dreams. May you do more than you are currently doing. May you challenge yourselves to be better than you already are. You actually are good people, but you can actually become better. You're doing amazing work, but you can actually do more than what you're doing. So I want to thank you, and I want to ask my sister, with whom I have been working, Maureen Anzaye, to step in.
My name is Maureen, and I'm the project manager for Cultural Heritage for Inclusive Growth program in Kenya at the British Council. It's been such an honor to be among such accomplished individuals who have been part of the panel sessions, moderators, and also our online audience. We have engaged with topics as diverse as community engagement strategies for youth heritage, design, built an environment for cultural heritage, digitization and online cultural heritage experience, restitution of cultural heritage in Africa, indigenous knowledge, food systems and climate change, cultural technology and climate change, and reclaiming narratives about African language, clothing, and accessories. And what a way to end every day with amazing musicians gracing our stage with such authentic and soulful sounds that represent the frequency of the Kenyan landscape. I borrowed those words from Dr. Skinder Hundal, who is our Director of Arts with the British Council. Thank you, Labdi and Juma Tutu and the Swahili Band. I hope that this symposium has provided you with new insights, partnership opportunities, and tools. If even one idea is shared during these 2 days that can be translated into a new strategy or policy, then we can say that the Cultural Heritage for Inclusive Growth Symposium has achieved one of its objectives. I hope as catalysts of change, you will return to our own communities with renewed commitment and inspiration to accelerate the ongoing work in the sector. Allow me to quote Dr. Joyce Jairo, who was our keynote speaker, and she said, "Culture will not grow without investment." So my take is that we all have a part to play in promoting, restoring, and rebuilding our cultural heritage. You can connect with us on our socials, that's British Council Facebook page, Instagram, that's at East Africa Arts, Twitter at KE British Council, and use our hashtag Culture Grows. Finally, I wish to thank you all for participating, and more so our international colleagues, Steve Stenning, who is our Head of Arts and Society globally, Nikki Locke, who is our Senior Program Manager for the Cultural Heritage for Inclusive Growth Program, Daniel Head, who is a CPF Cultural Protection Fund Grant Manager. Those are our colleagues from the UK who have joined us here. Our Kenyan team being Jill Coates, our Country Director, Sandra Chege, our Heads of Arts in Kenya, Wairimu Mwaura, who is our Program Consultant, Siokao Mtonga, who is also consulting with us, Shiro Mwendwa, Wamboi Mitaru, Mary Nduguri, and our amazing MC, Mwihaki Muraguri. Our wonderful partner, Professor Kimani, and the Twaweza Communications, and his lovely, lovely team. Dr. Athman Lali and his team for hosting us in Mombasa while we did a 2-day tour from Monday to Tuesday in Mombasa. I also want to thank you, our online audience, for joining these amazing sessions. I hope you have enjoyed your presence at the symposium. Thank you, and blessings to you all.
Thank you, Mo. So, I talked with Juma. Are you happy? I talked with Juma. And Juma has said, can pick you one last naba. So, we're going to have the band come back on stage. And as they're coming, I just also want to extend my own thanks for this incredible opportunity to be part of this symposium. It was very frustrating not to be able to ask my own questions because I really wanted to in some of those panels. But this is such important work. And for me, the thing that I walk away with is that indeed 1,000 flowers are blooming in the landscape of cultural heritage in Kenya. My name is Mwihaki Muraguri. I tell stories with my team at Paukwa Stories. Follow us on your socials. And it has been an absolute pleasure. Have a wonderful weekend.